Episode 5 of Green Planet is called Human Worlds, and this episode basically deals with humans' relationship with plants. So the first little bit of this episode, it kind of plays out like the rest of them. It's kind of an exploration of different plants in the human world. The first main thing we talk about is weeds. Outside of the plants that we choose to grow, they're the ones we come into contact with the most. Toad flax growing on the walls, that was quite interesting, showing you how their flowers grow towards the light and then yet tuck away in the darkness. That was interesting. Also, like the strangler figs. In warmer parts of the world, they're a plant that does pretty well in the cities. You see they're grown all over the walls. They are, pretty impressive structures. And even more impressive is actually watching how humans in more, wild parts of the world have essentially made little settlements in these figs by taking seeds and growing them in a certain way to basically form structures, steps. Like, it's pretty impressive stuff. I've seen that before in Human Planet in more detail, but it was really interesting to see it here. Really good refresher. It is probably the most interesting thing we've ever done with plants, I think, actually, turn them into structures. So that was really cool. I really liked that. Then we talk about grass, the other type of plant that we have a lot to do with because we know we grow it for crops. And we look at this one species of grass from Israel. It's obviously used to a more arid environment. And we see the seeds, when they drop off, in order to get away from their parent plant, they actually kind of walk. They basically dry up and then dampen to basically cause them to, rise and then fall, to basically move away into a little crevice or under a rock. That was really cool. The music was very kind of alien as well. It made it feel like very extraterrestrial. That was really cool. That was probably the most interesting part of the episode, to be honest. After that, we kind of stop that kind of stuff and it kind of becomes a conservation episode, which is fine. I mean, these episodes are usually alright, but they're never the best parts of the series, and I would say the same for this episode. It's not the best episode of the series, but all the stuff they talk about is interesting because it's plants. You don't really know as much about it. They talk about agriculture and the kind of history of it as well. That was really cool. The examples they used there were really good. How it was this pretty simple thing at the start, and then, we got the plants that we like to eat, and we basically just grew them everywhere. And even that was kind of in spirit of the rest of the series because they add personality to the plants. This kind of made it seem like the plants were actually manipulating us. But that was really good. That was a good twist on it, and I thought it was interesting because agriculture is something that's in all our lives, whether we actually are engaged in it or just, live off the results of it. It is something that, we as a species are, it's pretty important for us, and it's also a pretty important part of our development. It's basically what led to us becoming as successful as we are. So, interesting thing to talk about. But the fact that we've grown the same species all over the world has created a monoculture and isn't good for a lot of other plants and the animals that live on those plants. So that's a good thing to highlight, I think, because it is very important. Almonds were used as a great example. The story of the almonds is really, is really interesting. I knew about that already. How all these almonds, I think most of the almonds in the world are grown in this one part of California. Because all this space was cleared away for these almonds, the pollinators that the almonds rely on are dead. There's none there. So they actually have to import all these honeybees from all over the US to pollinate them. As I said, I already knew about that. But it was interesting to see it on screen because it is, probably one of the best examples, or at least one of the most extreme ones. Mountain beetles, there's these type of mountain pine beetles that attack longpole. There's these type of mountain pine beetles that attack longpole trees, which is another case where all these trees of the same species are grown in this one area. And when these beetles get in, they can actually wipe out entire forests. Not great for the people that own them, but not great for the plants either. So, that's a really interesting thing to highlight. And then we kind of move to more positive stuff, talking about the measures to try and save plants. We talk about the Kew Gardens and the massive seed banks there. That's something I think is kind of well known now, where there's all these seeds kept underground in these kind of refrigerated areas of species, some of which are gone already. Really cool stuff. And the stuff in Hawaii as well. Various things like Myconia, a type of plant that's basically was introduced and is basically spread over the island. And these guys get in helicopters and shoot them with the herbicides. Interesting stuff. The way the two guys walk out of the helicopter is very reminiscent of Top Gun. Obviously a deliberate choice. It was a little bit cheesy, but it's still fun. Also in Hawaii, you've got the Helicaya, which is a type of plant that's exclusively evolved to be pollinated by one species of bird. That species of bird is not as abundant in Hawaii anymore. In fact, it's so rare that it's very rare that they'll ever come across this plant. So this guy's basically going out to pollinate it and try and encourage them back. That was alright. Not as interesting as the Myconia stuff, but it was interesting enough. We go to Nairobi, we talk about how all the acacias are basically disappearing, and to kind of encourage people to grow plants, they've got these little seed balls that people throw around. It's kind of like a game almost. You can tell that communities are involved in it, and it looks like it's even taken on like a social media craze, where people, firing them out of helicopters and everything. Seems fun. Whatever it takes to get the plants back, I guess. And we end in this former cattle ranch in Brazil. South America as a whole has been pretty bad for cattle ranching and how much of the rainforest has been cut down by it. And this cattle ranch, the guys that owned it were basically like, let's just, try and plant some rainforest. Obviously a big undertaking. They didn't know if it was going to work. And now it's been a pretty big success. Loads of plants are back. Loads of animals are back. Things like coatimundi, various birds like coatzin, tamanduas, and actually they had bigger animals as well, like pumas. The pumas were there. It's really weird seeing pumas in a rainforest setting. That was quite cool. That was a really good way of ending the episode and the series as a whole, I think, because it was quite upbeat, quite interesting, and just pretty inspiring stuff. I thought it was pretty good. And then the diaries is all about the people filming the stuff in Hawaii. Because this episode has very much dealt with the humans and actually interviewed people, the diaries kind of felt a little bit redundant at that point because it was just stuff I'd already seen. But it was still fine to see it again, I guess. So it was something. So yeah, this episode is good. It's probably one of the weaker ones of the series, just because of the nature of how these episodes tend to go. Though it was very interesting. A lot of stuff in here I did know, but a lot of stuff I didn't, or at least hadn't seen before. So really cool stuff. And yeah, this series as a whole is pretty good. If you like plants, it's great. If you're not as interested in plants, it's worth checking out because it's a pretty good series, to be honest with you. It's pretty good at getting you engaged in plants, I think. So yeah, this episode's pretty good. I'm not going to do a top 10 list for this series because ultimately it is just plants. And while the plants have been great, I don't feel like I've got 10 really mind-blowing moments to talk about, so I'm not going to do that for this series. And yeah, this is the last video I'll be doing for the year, so yeah, I'll see you in January, I guess, for whatever I'm going to do. Let me know, obviously, in the comments below what series you'd like me to talk about next. Got a few that I kind of am interested in talking about. I'm also thinking of doing something else, like a different type of video in the new year, so, stay tuned for that, I guess. But yeah, as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want it. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time in the new year. Yeah, goodbye.